Welcome to another episode of Extend Web Services Marketing Minute on the Pregnancy Help Podcast. Today, we're talking about something every pregnancy help organization faces, donor relations, and more specifically, how to use marketing tools to build and strengthen those relationships. Thankfully, I don't have to tackle this topic alone. I have Extend Web Services web specialist Monet Reed with me today. Monet, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, we've got a pretty big topic, and I think people just hearing your title wouldn't think that you would have much to offer on this topic. And I'm not trying to put you in a hole. I just mean that web specialist. What does a web specialist know about donor relations?
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, no, I understand that. Well, I mean, besides us working with supporter sites, on a
Hmm.
daily basis, and just that being, whether it's donor focused or client focused, and having that in everything that we create and everything that we design or help our customers with, that's definitely something that's definitely involved with the job. But I actually, before, coming to Heartbeat and coming to Extend, I actually have some history with donor relations. So that's just helpful and, something that makes me excited to be able to talk about today, whether it's from, I used to work at a university and was an advancement ambassador there. So worked on that scene with just wonderful donors and getting to know and work with them. But then, as many people who know who are probably listening to this, I used to also work at a pregnancy center, and I was an assistant director there, which meant you wear tons of hats. And one of my favorite hats was working with the donors. So whether that was, planning events or fundraisers or just, the wonderful work of getting to create relationships with those who want to support the ministry. You know, that definitely is something I'm proud of to be a part of the history and why I'm excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, I didn't realize until you and I were talking, doing prep for this episode, how similar some of our jobs in the past have been. So I was at a pregnancy care center in Southeast Tennessee for 5.5 years, and it primarily was focused around development, the fundraisers and donor relations and major donors, what all that looked like. And I didn't realize you and I had that in common. You
Yeah.
seem to have enjoyed maybe doing events and stuff more than I did. Mine, it was like, oh, I have to do these events to hit these fundraising goals. But did you actually enjoy it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I always liked it. I liked that there was a pace to that work. There's something to you're always looking ahead and then you always have a finished goal. So I always love that. I love seeing it all come together. I love to celebrate things, so I always enjoy I do. So I always enjoyed, getting to come face to face with people that, you see, you talk to over the phone all year long and then getting to actually see them and ask about their family, get to know them. So yeah, I
Oh,
always loved the events.
I think that's great. I did enjoy the donor, like specifically like donor relation side of things when it came to just talking to them. But I really loved the strategy behind it. What do I have to put in place so that we can reach our goals for that year? That was kind of where my sweet spot was.
So you mean you didn't love, a million little things going wrong that should have just been very simple tasks and, that last minute stress of like, where is our main speaker? You didn't love that, Delaney? Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, I just feel like people like different types of adrenaline, and that wasn't quite mine. You guys are probably listening to this and thinking they have sold us a bad bill of goods because we haven't even given you any information yet about donor relations and how you can apply it. We really, at this point, are just bonding. So I'm glad you could be here for that. But let's dive into it. So it's interesting, marketing is what you do to promote the buying or selling of a product or service. Pregnancy health organizations market to two different groups. So you have your supporters, so your prayer warriors, your volunteers, your donors, and then you have your clients. And you speak to both groups very differently. On the client side, you are wanting to pull people in to connect them with your services. And on the supporter side, you are wanting to pull them in to support your mission that allows you to provide these services to the community. I don't know, Monet, have you thought about that before? How PHOs have to do double duty?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's an interesting dynamic, but obviously we're talking about donors today. And just I think about the difference in how, the benefits of each, right? Where with the client, you really get such a tiny little snapshot of their life. You get to know them. And I'm thinking with marketing, right? Getting to know
Hmm.
who you're serving and how to serve them well. With a client, it's one way where you get to know them very briefly, or you hope and you pray get to know them for a long period of time. But most of the time, it's just a short kind of a stint or a part of their journey that you get to meet them, get to know them.
Hmm.
But I think of with the donors, how different that can be, where it's like you really have so much access
Hmm.
to engage and get to know them on such a deeper level. They want to know you as much as you want to know them. Um, so it's so different. Kind of can be an opposite in a lot
Hmm.
of ways. And and it's a huge task for sure. It's a big job, but yeah, definitely two different types of people that you're trying to engage with.
Yeah, and in previous episodes and in our blogs, we primarily talk about that client focused marketing on whatever we're doing, whether it's Google ads or social media. But we really wanted to take a moment to talk about how the same principles we've discussed for client focused marketing works for supporter communication as well. Talking about brand awareness and consistent communication, including those touch points and having a marketing plan, sharing stories. And I don't want this to be alarming. And there's also way more we could talk about, but we have a couple things that we really want to dive into to make sure we provide you at least with a good foundation in case you haven't done much with donor relations or you're sitting at a point where you're like, I don't really know what my next move should be. Before we move forward, though, there is one thing we need to make sure we're on the same page about before we dive into social media and stuff, and that is brand awareness. So making sure your brand is established. So when you're talking to your community, whether that's supporters or clients, you know who you are and you are clearly communicating who you are and what you do to the community. And that is you communicate that through the advertisements you have out there, through the events you have, through the interactions you have with people. But your brand is also determined by how people perceive you. So there is definitely an active element, but there's also a passive element. And that's why it's so important that you know what your brand is, and then it just becomes a part of your organization's entire identity. So when you are interacting with people, welcoming them into the center, when you are having conversations behind the scenes, when you're talking to volunteers, that who you say you are, who you've said you wanted to be in that brand is coming across, whether you are overtly sharing your mission and vision or just interacting with people in such a way that speaks to who you are. Does that make sense, Monet? I feel like I just said a lot of words.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So I feel like when we usually talk about brand, we're immediately thinking of like, or we're usually talking about like fonts, colors, advertisements in the paper or things like that. But I feel like when it comes to especially donor relations, that piece that's missing is that it can actually be more of an emotional type branding, if that makes sense, where really, I view it like being a good friend. You look at it and your brand should be someone who is, present, authentic, and, someone who someone wants to have a relationship with. And I think that comes across when, your brand, it should be consistent and it should be authentic, yes, but it should be so seamless that it integrates into your mission
Mm-hmm.
and it does not come across like a marketing tactic, where, yeah, your brand should show that you are a good friend, that you want to be intentional with your relationships and getting to know your donor, being there and wanting to share your heart. Does that make sense?
It does. No, it does make sense. I loved how you said that. I did want to, before we dive into social media, I did want to say that you started off with a really good point. And brand is the things that you mentioned, like your brand colors and your font. So that before, like when somebody just sees something of yours out in the community, they think, oh, that's New Life, or oh, that's Grace Point, whatever it is your center's name is, they start to recognize this looks like you. So that is important too.
For sure.
Now, social media may seem daunting, especially since we're suggesting you have separate social accounts for your clients and supporters, but there are some easy tips you can start implementing today.
Okay, Delaney. So I've got a question for you, actually. So why is it so important? And I know that you feel really strongly about this, as you should. Why is it so important that, centers should have separate accounts for their supporters, their donors, and then their clients when it comes to social media?
Oh, sure. I think it's the same reason that we have separate websites. You're speaking to two
Hmm.
completely different audiences. I've definitely seen people try to incorporate the two, but I think it's just better when you can make both groups the heroes their of both social media pages.
Yeah.
So on the one, you're working with supporters who are you're pointing out like, hey, because you've partnered with us, because you've prayed with us, because you've donated, because you volunteered, this is what we're doing in the community. And then on the client side, it's you are strong and you have time and we are happy to listen. Let's talk about your options. Totally two different groups accomplishing different goals, really. And I think it can get muddied. I think people can get confused. And when you're doing any kind of marketing, you want clarity to be keen.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a great way to say it.
And so what you'll find is on both of them, do want to you do want to position it so that they can put themselves in the seats of like, I helped accomplish this on the donor side or on the client side, like I can accomplish this. So on the donor side, you instead of saying something like we gave out 20 baby baskets, you would say something like because of your generosity 20 families received baby baskets this month. You just do a very quick change in position where you're putting it on them. It's not we, it's because of your generosity, which
Oh,
I think
yeah.
is really powerful. What do you think?
I absolutely love that. Just that point because it's true. It's, someone, especially when it comes to social media, people are going to follow, people are going to engage with, where they see themselves involved or what they're passionate about. But just to see themselves represented, which
Hmm.
rightfully they should, they are, such an instrumental piece of this ministry. But to get to kind of get those check-ins and see themselves in there, I think is not only, it's kind of respectful or just, fitting, but it is from a marketing standpoint or just from, a donor relations standpoint, it just makes sense.
Yeah. And I really like how you were talking about giving them something to connect to. We talk about how it's important to share testimonials, but really it's important to share stories. So, whether that story is coming from a client, which would be great, or it's stories from your volunteers, your team members, your donors, this allows people to connect in with what's happening. And it really gives a kind of like a 360 view of your organization, what you guys are accomplishing. It gives different perspectives, but also people can see themselves in the different stories that are being shared. And obviously, if you are talking specifically about a client, you would need something like a media release form. But if somebody's just sharing their experience, they can be vague about the details, like the client that they were working with. They could say something like, I was working with an abortion minded woman. That right there isn't giving away any details that could point to a specific person, but then they're still free to share their story. Monet, I'm sharing my thoughts on social media, but you have worked at a center, you have worked with donor relations at a university. Tell me some of the things that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we talked about being that good friend, like I described it earlier, but I really think what matters here is just like making sure that you take the time, take a breath. I think it can be so daunting. We've got so many tasks, you have so many things on your plate to accomplish and take care of. But really, I think one, a big pivot from, this being something on your to-do list to taking a breath and realizing that this can be one of the most encouraging parts of your day. You know, Communicating with your donors can actually be something that's uplifting for you and your heart as they're rooting you on. But also, it's the same, it's a mutual thing. So one, take a breath, realize that it's, this is an authentic relationship that can be a blessing on both sides and is a blessing on both sides. And I think when that comes, when we talk about it as a real relationship, I think that then you need to realize, okay, I need to take the time to make check-ins. I need to, you know, whether that's the way you've integrated it, when you get a beautiful story, you
Mhm.
something good happens in your life, you want to call and tell your friend, you want to tell your mom, you want to tell whatever. I think that should be the same way with your donors. You have a beautiful impacting story, something or a challenge. immediately with the right discretion, you should be thinking, I need to go tell my donors. Not that you have to, but you want to, that there should be this check-in. And I think another portion, after that, and including them in, your ministry in that way. I think another part is, including yourself in their life, making sure that there's time, intentional time, to, ask what you can be praying for them for, and then truly praying for them,
Mhm.
whether that's on the call and taking a minute of your day, which is a blessing. That is a blessing to be able to pray with others, but then making sure that you're continuing that prayer afterwards and that you're keeping them in the forefront of your mind. You're bringing that to your morning meeting. I understand that that might seem like a rabbit hole, that that's not marketing there, but this is where it should be more of a DNA kind of trait into your donor relations and realizing that it's all about being super intentional. And I think once you start realizing that kind of that worldview switch or that just that lens where you're starting to see them as not a task, but seeing them as just a beautiful relationship that God has brought into your ministry, that then I think you'll start to see, okay, hey, when I'm posting on my social media,
Mhm.
hey, when I'm sending out my emails, I think that is kind of a beautiful way to get that authentic brand that is really, not a technique or a tactic, but is just a pure brand, if that makes sense.
And as far as social media is concerned, don't be afraid to lean into your strengths. If you are someone who is more spontaneous, then allow space to be spontaneous in your social posts. You might say, hey, we had an abortion minded woman who chose life today. And that's not something you're obviously scheduling ahead of time. If you are somebody who does a lot better with the schedule, then make sure you have it built into your schedule that you are doing a video every Wednesday at 2, or you have social posts going out on Tuesday and Thursday. Maybe it's your needs, maybe it is some updates, maybe it's a check presentation photo. But you can like lean into what your strength is. Just try to be consistent, whether that is being leaving space to post a couple times each week, just knowing in your head, I got to do this twice this week, but there's not maybe a set time. And then on the other side, if you do better with some kind of scheduling, then put that on your calendar. And speaking of scheduling, we have some email marketing we're going to talk about.
Yes, yeah, we could definitely jump into that because I think that's something that honestly, emails are a big part of most people's everyday life. That's usually how we're corresponding, a phone call, sure, but
Mhm.
it's really truly through email. And I think sometimes that can be just a daunting task. And I think as we look at it through like, the marketing lens of how to communicate and
Mhm.
schedule and with those donors and creating that, I think there are definitely some wonderful tips and just strategies to making
Mhm.
sure that you're building that strong relationship with your donors through emails. So I think first it would definitely be kind of be obvious. So like that personalizing your message.
Mhm.
Really, so you should always make sure. I know that you may have 20 emails to send out. Take the time, make sure that those are addressed by name, not
Mhm.
just dear donor. I think that we all just got that cold feeling down our spine. And you hear that, you're like, oh, okay, that doesn't feel great. But so I think making sure, you're definitely addressing them by name. And then also just making sure that just as specific as the name, it should also be, the reference of their gift. So making sure that, if you're talking about a donation, it's not thank you so much for the donation, moving on. It's thank you so much for this specific donation of this many
Mhm.
dollars or this many diapers or the time given, anything like that. It should be specific and feel personalized for sure. And then I think, kind of going back to it, I know harping on the same thing, but just the genuineness, people can read that in a world of all the things being kind of, just robotic, whatever, that genuine gratitude, making sure that you are, conveying clearly your appreciation for their support. And then remembering it, making sure if you're seeing them in person or, at an event, just keeping that personal remembrance of those specific gifts. I think that can go a long way.
There are going to be plenty of emails where you have that one on one communication with someone. But thankfully, since budgets are tight and time is short, there is some automation you can put into place that still allows you to be genuine and sincere in your thanks while also helping you utilize your time to the best way possible. And this looks different. So you have things that you would do at a beginner level for email automation. And that is taking your email list and sending them out a welcome email, and then making sure every month you send out an update where you're just kind of telling them, like, this is what's happening. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's just a touch point that allows them to connect with what you're doing. At the intermediate level, that's when you get into segmentation. So you take that same email list, but you divide it out. So maybe it is separated by how they came to you, volunteers and donors, prayer warriors. Maybe it's separated by how much they give, monthly donors, one time donors, major gift donations. Maybe it's separated by the things that they're interested in. Like they really love your, whatever your version of Earn While You Learn is, or they really love your medical program and what you're doing there. So you segment it and then you email them updates based on that. I wouldn't go overboard. So you know what your time capacity is. If you have time for 3 segmentations where you would have 3 different emails, lean into that. If you have capacity for more, great. It when you start to segment, that also doesn't have to be a monthly thing. You might have some emails that go out semi-annually, some emails that go out quarterly, some that do go out monthly. It's just your time to look at your email list, what segments make most sense, and then when those should go out. And finally, at an advanced level, you're looking at what software is best for allowing you to dig into the reports. But that is at the advanced level, and you don't immediately have to put money into this if you don't want to, if you don't have it on your list. So again, both sides of the coin here, but I agree with Monet. There is a way to be very sincere and connect with people while also allowing you to work with the time that you have.
I think that that's what's so beautiful because so many PHOs, we're all in so many different, scenarios. Some are large, some are small. It always looks so different. And so really that's why we're here. I feel like that's the benefit of having this conversation is, seeing whether you are in that place where you've got a lot of resources or you're in a tiny town where you know everybody and you already know them by name and things like that. This is a way for I hope it's helpful to different places. So I love it.
I think it's great. And we're going to finish off on our communications calendar. Monet, did you guys ever work from a communications calendar or marketing calendar or marketing plan or something when you were at the center or the university?
So it's funny, yeah, two very different experiences. When I was at the university, it was very, very, we had the calendar for sure. It was very
Hmm.
scheduled. And then, when I was at the pregnancy center, we were, that one side of the coin that didn't have a ton of necessarily resources or we just we were just smaller and that's
Yeah.
okay. And so no, we didn't. So I've worked in both arenas. How about you?
Okay, so that's fun to think about because I have been at a marketing agency and I was at a center, and both of them had communication rhythms. The center I was at hadn't really had anything major. They, obviously had the Walk for Life in the fall, we had the spring banquet, but we didn't necessarily have other rhythms. And we started to build those in, like the annual appeals. There would be a mid-year one and an end of the year appeal. And then as time went on, we started doing things like sending out updates. We had, our quarterly newsletter. And then we started getting really intentional about having monthly touch points with some major donors. And then on the agency side, there were specific touch points they had for current clients and potential clients. And one of those things was just this annual silly Christmas card. So I don't know. It's interesting to see at 2 different places, completely different places, how they both had built in rhythms to their marketing and donor slash client relations calendars.
Yeah, that's cool. Honestly, I never actually had thought about it, schedules or calendars, but the rhythm is just right on point to describe the way it works. Because as I'm thinking about it, even, where yes, we kind of were more of that impromptu correspondence when I was at the center.
Hmm.
But no, that's not totally fair, I guess, because we did have those certain things worked in, like that quarterly, update and things like that. But whatever the rhythm is, it seems like you can really, as long as you're being intentional as long as you have some sort of, consistency and, you're not ghosting your donors or that just would be such a missed opportunity. I don't think anyone's probably doing that, but I think that finding that rhythm, recognizing that there is a rhythm and whether, you see that there's room for change and, improvement or just really leaning into the one that you have set up.
Yeah, and if you don't have set rhythms right now, then it's not too late to build it in. You
Yeah.
can look at a just normal calendar and figure out where does it make sense to start communicating with people. So if you do have events, make sure you're building in thank you cards after it. Make sure that a month later, anywhere from 2 weeks to a month later, you are giving them an update saying, hey, this is how much we've raised. And then maybe 6 months later, being like, hey, this is what we've done with the funds that you helped us achieve. And it doesn't have to be just around your events. There's plenty of organizations that like to do things around Mother's Day, around Father's Day, Christmas, the New Year, just at different times of the years. What's really important is just you popping it on your calendar and then figuring out what am I going to do around this so that in the craziness of everything else, you can plan well for it, even if planning isn't your forte.
I think that's great advice.
I do think we should go back to Monet here because yes, we have it set on the calendar. We know, okay, this thing's going to happen and this is going to be our response to it. But it is important to make sure that you continue to be sincere. It's not just something you're checking off your list. So what does that look like? So it doesn't feel like you're just there a means to an end. What would that look like, my friend?
Okay. So I'll give an example of honestly what comes to mind. And when I think of those relationships, but it's pretty silly, but I honestly think it reminds me of when, it's your birthday or it's Christmas
Mhm.
time. And for me, like I would get a card from my grandmother and
Yeah.
I open it and, there's cash in there or there's a check in there, right? And you kind of whether she's there or not, and you have this awkward moment where there's some people, you get the card, you maybe pretend to read it or whatever, and then you're like, oh, and you're just looking for the check. It's terrible. I know. But then there's like the other case scenario, and it's the really funny one. And you are reading this card, you open it up, and you just pretend to not see the check at all. And it just
Yeah.
drops in. You're like, oh, thank you so much, Grandma, for this beautiful card. And so I think as silly as this sounds, I really think that it does apply, right? Stay with me, where it reminds me, where we can do all of those things. We can be very intentional where, making sure you're reading the card, but then you're
Mhm.
actually looking at the check and you're appreciating that check and, or, whatever that gift is. But here we go, right? I think then it's making sure that you call and you're giving that appreciation afterwards.
Mhm.
It's the follow through. It's making sure that you are, you're talking about being genuine. It's that, hey, I'm not only I'm seeing you, I'm seeing the sacrifices that you're giving, and I'm seeing the intentionality of, your relationship with our center. And then I'm also looking at the gift that you've given and I'm really appreciating it. I'm valuing it. I'm not ignoring it to just try to jump to the personal or the relationship. I'm seeing that I'm appreciative, but then it's that follow through. So it's that calling, hey, thank you for that gift and that appreciation that follows. I'm a little nervous now. I'm bringing up such kind of a silly, example, but you're asking about that genuineness and how to kind of, I think it's from start to finish. And I
Yeah.
think that there's a process of intentionality that may not come naturally or may feel uncomfortable, but I think it's a muscle that we can grow into that really has that follow through and that continued relationship.
I think it's great. It brought to mind how, as a kid, I was definitely celebrating the cash. And then as a teenager, I was still celebrating the cash, but I definitely did the whole, oh, and there happens to be cash on this card along with this great message you gave me. No, I think that's good. And I think that follow through is an important time to really reinforce like how they are your partner in everything you accomplish, the way that they
Hmm.
have poured in, whether it is prayers or volunteering or donations, like how they have poured in makes them a partner in your mission. And you can't really reinforce that without that consistent communication. And it's not always going to be appeals. There are going to be plenty of times, and this is why it's good to have this calendar that kind of like says what you want to accomplish. There's going to be plenty of times where you are just hammering home the mission. You're just hammering home success stories, things you're doing in the community, and reiterating how they are a part of that so that when you do ask for them to step up and give or step up and volunteer. They are all in because they see this as a part of something they already do. They have ownership in what you're accomplishing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important too to remember that they're there and they are supporting you because they want to. This
Mhm.
is not something where you should feel as like a maybe a defense or a chase. Is that everyone who is giving in this moment or is a donor of yours is there because they want to be a part of it. They want to be so that part of I feel like just like that daunting maybe that feeling of trying to pitch or sell, where the opposite side of the coin, I where it's 100%. You are, engaging with, your donors because you do absolutely need their gifts and you do need their support. But just that piece of knowing that they're there because they want to be there, and it's really your job just to encourage that.
So, when you walk away from this podcast, what is the one thing that we are encouraging you or challenging you to do? I'd say, do you have 30 minutes or even 15 minutes this week to sit down and consider what does my donor relations look like? What is my brand telling them? What are my interactions telling them? What are we saying on social media? What does our email marketing look like? What does our calendar year and touch points look like? And what is one thing that we could do different? How can we connect with them better and really make them feel like they are a part of what we're accomplishing? Because they are. Thank you so much for your time. Monet, how do you feel?
I feel good. I think that everything that you have shared today is just like kind of golden nuggets and just really helpful. And I just really hope that it reaches the centers and those that can really use that little encouragement and implement those changes. Yeah,
Ooh, and speaking of encouragement, if you guys take any of the tips we are giving you in these podcast episodes and you put them into action and they do great things or even just good things or even fine, whatever. If you see an impact from them, we want to hear about it. So reach out to us at support@extendwebservices.com and we will celebrate with you, whether that is about social media or donor relations or something client focused or Google ads, whatever it is, we want to celebrate with you. And if you are interested in our products, which we work to make affordable and effective to help you do more in your community, then we'd love to talk with you about that as well. Again, that's support@extendwebservices.com. We so appreciate your time. Thank you.